The morning sun filtered through the tall windows of Lincoln Middle School, casting long shadows across the polished hallway floors. 12-year-old Maya Rodriguez clutched her backpack straps tightly as she walked toward her locker, her heart already racing with the familiar anxiety that had become her constant companion over the past 3 months. The whispers started before she even reached her destination, rippling through the clusters of students like a wave she couldn't escape. At her locker, Maya fumbled with the combination lock, her fingers trembling slightly. She could feel their eyes on her back, burning into her shoulder blades. The Richardson twins, Brittany and Brandon, stood nearby with their usual entourage of popular 8th graders. They were the unofficial royalty of Lincoln Middle School, the kind of kids whose parents drove luxury cars and owned vacation homes in places Maya had only seen in magazines. There she goes again. Brittany's voice carried clearly down the hallway, designed to be heard, making up more stories about her imaginary superhero mom. Maya's jaw tightened, but she kept her focus on her locker, spinning the dial with deliberate precision. She had learned that responding only made things worse, only gave them more ammunition to use against her. The laughter that followed Brittany's comment felt like needles against her skin. The truth was that Maya's mother, Commander Sarah Rodriguez, was indeed a Navy SEAL, one of the first women to graduate from the grueling BUD/S training program. But in this affluent suburban school where most kids' parents were doctors, lawyers, or business executives, Maya's claims seemed like desperate attempts for attention. The fact that her mother was frequently deployed, often for months at a time, only made the story seem more suspicious to her classmates. "My dad says there's no way her mom is really in the military," Brandon chimed in, loud enough for half the hallway to hear. He looked it up, and women can't even be SEALs. She's probably just a secretary on a base somewhere, and Maya's embarrassed about it. The words stung more than Maya wanted to admit. She grabbed her English textbook and slammed her locker shut, perhaps with more force than necessary. The metal clang echoed through the corridor, drawing even more attention her way. She could feel the heat rising in her cheeks, that familiar mixture of anger and humiliation that had become her constant state at school. Mrs. Patterson, her English teacher, was already writing the day's assignment on the whiteboard when Maya slipped into class. She took her usual seat in the back corner, a strategic position that allowed her to avoid eye contact with most of her classmates. The desk next to her remained empty, as it had been since the mockery began. No one wanted to sit near the girl who told lies about her family. As Mrs. Patterson began discussing their current novel, Maya's mind drifted to the last video call she'd had with her mother 3 weeks ago. Sarah had been somewhere she couldn't name, in a location she couldn't disclose, doing work she couldn't describe. But even through the grainy connection, Maya could see the exhaustion in her mother's eyes, the weight of responsibility that came with her position. "Maya? Maya Rodriguez." Mrs. Patterson's voice cut through her thoughts. The teacher was looking at her expectantly, and Maya realized she had missed a question entirely. "I'm sorry, what?" Maya asked, sitting up straighter. "I asked if you could share what you wrote for yesterday's homework assignment. We were supposed to write about someone we admire and why." Maya's stomach dropped. She had written about her mother, of course. It was the only topic that had felt genuine, the only subject about which she could write with true passion. But sharing it now, in front of these classmates who already thought she was a liar, felt like walking into an ambush. "I'd rather not share today," Maya said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. Mrs. Patterson's expression softened with concern. The teacher had noticed the social dynamics in her classroom, the way certain students had isolated Maya, but school politics were complicated, and intervention wasn't always straightforward. "It's part of the participation grade, Maya. Just a few paragraphs." With trembling hands, Maya pulled out her notebook. The pages were worn, filled with her neat handwriting and small doodles in the margins. She had written 5 pages about her mother, pouring out admiration and loneliness in equal measure. Now she would have to read it to an audience that had already decided she was a fraud. She began reading, her voice shaky at first but growing steadier as she lost herself in the words. She described her mother's dedication, the early morning training runs she maintained even while on leave, the way she studied maps and strategy books late into the night. Maya talked about the physical scars her mother bore, the stories she could tell about teamwork and perseverance, the pride in her eyes when she wore her uniform. My mother is the strongest person I know, Maya read, her voice now clear and firm. Not because she can do more push-ups than anyone else, or because she's completed missions that most people can't even imagine. She's strong because she chose a path that was harder, that required more sacrifice, that meant being away from her family for long periods. She's strong because even when people doubted her, even when they said she couldn't do it, she proved them wrong. The classroom had fallen silent. Even Brittany and Brandon, who sat in the middle rows, had stopped their usual whispered commentary. Maya finished reading and closed her notebook, her hands still shaking slightly, but her head held high. "Thank you, Maya," Mrs. Patterson said warmly. "That was beautifully written." But as soon as the words of praise left the teacher's mouth, a snicker erupted from somewhere in the middle of the room. Then another. Within seconds, half the class was laughing, though they tried to muffle it behind their hands and textbooks. "Nice creative writing," someone muttered, just loud enough to be heard. "I admire Batman too," another voice added, triggering more laughter. Mrs. Patterson's face flushed with anger. "That's enough. This is a respectful classroom, and we don't mock each other's family members." "But, Mrs. Patterson," Brittany spoke up, her voice dripping with false innocence, "we're not mocking her family. We're just saying that maybe Maya has a very active imagination. My mom knows a lot of military people, and she says women aren't Navy SEALs. Maya's probably just confused about what her mom actually does." "Yeah," Brandon added. "Or maybe her mom told her that to sound cool, and Maya believed it. It's not her fault if she's been lied to." The classroom erupted in whispered conversations. Some students nodded in agreement with the Richardson twins, while others looked uncomfortable but said nothing. Maya felt her eyes burning with unshed tears, but she refused to cry in front of them. She had learned that lesson the hard way during the first week of this nightmare. Mrs. Patterson tried to regain control of the classroom, but the damage was done. The rest of the period passed in a blur for Maya, who spent the time staring at her desk and fighting the urge to run out of the room. When the bell finally rang, she was the first one out the door. Lunchtime was its own special torture. Maya had taken to eating in the library, where Mrs. Chun, the librarian, had quietly made it known that she was welcome. The older woman never asked questions, never pushed Maya to explain why she preferred books to the cafeteria's social chaos. She simply smiled, pointed toward the comfortable reading chairs in the back corner, and let Maya find peace among the shelves. Today, however, the library was closed for maintenance. Maya stood in the hallway, her brown paper lunch bag in hand, trying to decide where to go. The cafeteria was out of the question. She had tried eating there during the first few weeks after the mockery started, sitting alone at the end of a long table while groups of students pointedly avoided her. The loneliness of being surrounded by people, but completely isolated, was worse than being actually alone. She ended up in the courtyard, a small outdoor space between buildings that most students ignored. There was a bench under a large oak tree, and Maya settled there, grateful for the solitude. She unwrapped her sandwich, her appetite gone, but knowing she needed to eat something. The sandwich was halfway to her mouth when she heard footsteps on the concrete path. Maya looked up to find 3 girls from her grade approaching. They weren't part of the Richardson twins' inner circle, but they weren't friendly to Maya either. They existed in that middle zone of students who didn't actively participate in the mockery, but benefited from the social hierarchy it created. "Hey, Maya," the tallest girl, Jessica, said. Her tone was neutral, not quite friendly, but not hostile either. "Can we ask you something?" Maya set down her sandwich, her guard immediately up. "What? Is it true about your mom? Is she really in the military?" For a moment, Maya felt a flicker of hope. Maybe these girls were genuinely curious. Maybe they wanted to understand rather than mock. "Yes," Maya said carefully. "She's a commander in the Navy. She's deployed right now. But is she really a SEAL?" Another girl, Sophie, pressed. "Because everyone's saying that's impossible." Maya's hope deflated. This wasn't curiosity, it was interrogation. They wanted her to either admit she'd been lying or to double down so they could report back to the others and fuel more gossip. "Yes, she is," Maya said firmly. "I know it's rare, but it's true. The three girls exchanged glances, a whole conversation happening in their eye contact that Maya wasn't privy to. Jessica shrugged, a gesture that somehow managed to convey both dismissal and judgment. "If you say so," she said. "It just seems weird that you don't have any proof. Like, if my mom was a Navy SEAL, I'd have pictures all over social media, you know? I'd be showing everyone." "My mom's work is classified," Maya explained, a sentence she'd repeated so many times it had lost all meaning. "She can't share details about her missions or even always where she is. And when she's deployed, communication is limited." "Right?" Sophie said, drawing out the word in a way that made clear she didn't believe a word of it. "That's convenient." They walked away, leaving Maya alone with her uneaten sandwich and the familiar weight of frustration in her chest. The worst part wasn't even the disbelief. It was the fact that her mother's accomplishments, her sacrifices, her incredible career, had been reduced to a joke in the hallways of Lincoln Middle School. The afternoon brought gym class, another arena where Maya's isolation was on full display. When teams were chosen for volleyball, she was always picked last, a formality that everyone endured with barely concealed impatience. Today was no different. She stood on the sideline as captains selected their teams, watching as even the least athletic students were chosen before her. "I guess we get Maya," the captain of her team finally said, her tone making it clear that this was a burden rather than a choice. During the game, her teammates barely passed her the ball. When they did, it was usually a desperate last resort when no one else was available. Maya had actually been a decent volleyball player before all this started. Her mother had taught her the basics during one of her leave periods, emphasizing the importance of teamwork and communication. But now, isolated and ignored, her skills had atrophied from lack of use. After gym, Maya changed quickly in the locker room, trying to avoid the conversations happening around her. But as she was leaving, she overheard Brittany talking to a group of girls near the sinks. "My mom is organizing the Veterans Day assembly next month," Brittany was saying, examining her reflection as she spoke. "She's bringing in real military people to talk to the school. Maybe we can ask them about Navy SEALs and see if they mention any women. I bet Maya will be so embarrassed when the truth comes out." The comment was clearly intended for Maya to hear. She paused at the door, her hand on the handle, debating whether to respond. But what could she say? That her mother might not even be in the country for Veterans Day? That even if she were, she might not be able to attend due to operational security? That the entire premise of proving herself to these people was exhausting and unfair? Instead, Maya pushed through the door and walked away, adding one more small hurt to the collection she'd been gathering all day. The final period was history class with Mr. Thompson, one of the few teachers who seemed to notice that Maya was struggling. He had served in the Army years ago, and something about his demeanor suggested he might actually believe her about her mother. But he had never said anything directly, never offered support beyond the occasional kind word or gentle encouragement. Today's lesson was about military history, specifically about the evolution of Special Operations Forces. Maya tried to pay attention, taking notes and focusing on the lecture, but she could feel the stares from her classmates. Every mention of elite military units seemed to trigger knowing glances and suppressed smirks directed her way. Special Operations Forces like Navy SEALs undergo some of the most rigorous training in the world, Mr. Thompson explained, clicking through slides showing obstacle courses and training scenarios. The selection process is designed to test not just physical strength, but mental resilience, teamwork, and adaptability. Only a small percentage of candidates make it through. Is it true that women can't be SEALs? Brandon called out from the back of the room, not bothering to raise his hand. Mr. Thompson paused, his eyes moving briefly to Maya before returning to Brandon. That's actually a common misconception. The combat exclusion policy was lifted in 2016, opening all military positions to women, including Special Operations Forces. The first woman graduated from SEAL training in 2021. It's extremely rare, as the standards are the same for everyone regardless of gender, but it is possible and has happened. The classroom went silent. Maya felt every eye turn toward her, and she kept her gaze fixed on her notebook, her heart pounding. She had been vindicated by a teacher, by someone with actual military experience. But Instead of relief, she felt only dread about what would come next. That doesn't mean Maya's mom is one, though, Brittany said quickly, her voice sharp. I mean, what are the odds? There's probably like 5 women total, and one of them just happens to be her mom? In our school? That's statistically impossible. Statistics don't determine individual cases, Mr. Thompson said firmly. And I'd appreciate it if we could focus on the lesson rather than on our classmates' personal lives. But the seed had been planted. As class ended and students filed out, Maya could hear the conversation starting up again, everyone analyzing the odds, deciding that it was simply too unlikely to be true. She had gone from being a definite liar to being a probable liar, which somehow felt like an even more precarious position. The school day finally ended, and Maya trudged to the bus stop. She sat alone, as usual, watching out the window as the neighborhoods rolled by. When she got home, the house was empty. Her father, a high school math teacher, wouldn't be home for another hour. The silence was both a relief and a reminder of all that was missing. Maya dropped her backpack by the door and went to her mother's study, a small room that Sarah had claimed as her own when they first moved into this house 5 years ago. The walls were lined with bookshelves holding military history texts, leadership manuals, and novels about adventure and exploration. Her mother's desk was neat, organized, everything in its place even though she hadn't been home in 4 months. On the wall behind the desk hung her mother's framed certificates and commendations, though they were careful about what they displayed. There were no explicit mentions of SEAL operations, no classified information. Just enough to show a distinguished military career to anyone who visited, but not enough to violate security protocols. Maya sank into her mother's desk chair, spinning slowly and looking around the room. This was where she felt closest to Sarah, surrounded by her books and her carefully organized files. On the desk was a framed photo of the two of them from 3 years ago, before her mother's last deployment cycle began. They were hiking in the mountains, both grinning at the camera, Sarah's arm around Maya's shoulders. That version of her life seemed impossibly distant now. Back then, Maya had been proud of her mother, had told everyone at her old school about Sarah's career without a second thought. But that had been a different school, a different community, a place where military service was respected and understood. Here, in this affluent suburb where success was measured in income brackets and property values, her mother's service was viewed with suspicion rather than respect. Maya's phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out, hoping irrationally that it might be a message from her mother, even though she knew communications were restricted right now. Instead, it was a notification from the school's social media group, something she'd joined at the beginning of the year before everything fell apart. Against her better judgment, Maya opened the app. The latest post was a meme, clearly created by one of her classmates, showing a stick figure in military gear with the caption, "Maya's mom is definitely a Navy SEAL. Trust me, bro." The comments below were filled with laughing emojis and jokes about fictional characters and made-up stories. The following weeks passed in a blur of sameness that Maya had come to dread. Each day brought the same whispers, the same sideways glances, the same crushing isolation. October gave way to early November, and the autumn leaves that carpeted the school grounds seemed to mirror the decay of Maya's social life. What had started as active mockery had evolved into something perhaps worse, a collective decision to simply pretend she didn't exist. In the cafeteria, students would literally look through her as if she were invisible. In group projects, teachers had to assign her to teams because no one would voluntarily partner with her. During lunch, even the library, her sanctuary, had become uncomfortable as students began studying there more frequently, their presence a reminder that she had nowhere that was truly her own. The only bright spot in Maya's increasingly dark world was an unexpected friendship that had begun to form with Kevin Chun, the librarian's grandson. Kevin was a 7th grader who split his time between 2 schools due to his parents' custody arrangement, which meant he was only at Lincoln Middle School 3 days a week. His outsider status, combined with his genuine kindness, made him immune to the social politics that governed everyone else. "They're idiots," Kevin said matter-of-factly one afternoon as they sat in the library's back corner. He was helping Maya with her math homework, a subject where she'd been struggling due to her inability to focus. "I looked it up. There are definitely women Navy SEALs. Not many, but they exist. Maya looked up from her textbook, surprised. You looked it up? Of course I did. You kept mentioning it, and I was curious. Kevin pushed his glasses up his nose, a habitual gesture Maya had learned to recognize. I found articles about it, official Navy statements, everything. I don't understand why people don't just Google it themselves if they're so convinced you're lying. Because they don't want to know the truth, Maya said quietly. They want to be right more than they want to be informed. Kevin considered this, then nodded. That's actually pretty insightful. And depressing. But mostly insightful. Their friendship was a lifeline. But it came with complications. Kevin's part-time presence meant Maya couldn't rely on him every day. And on the days he wasn't there, the loneliness felt even more acute. Additionally, Kevin's association with her had begun to affect his own social standing. Maya had noticed other students giving him odd looks, heard whispers questioning why he'd choose to spend time with that girl who makes things up. One afternoon in late October, Maya was walking home from the bus stop when a car pulled up beside her. Her heart jumped with fear before she recognized Mrs. Chun, Kevin's grandmother, and the school librarian. The older woman rolled down her window, her expression warm but concerned. Maya, dear, can I give you a ride home? I was hoping we could talk. Maya hesitated, then nodded and got into the car. Mrs. Chun drove slowly through the suburban streets, seemingly in no hurry to reach Maya's house. Kevin told me about what's been happening at school, Mrs. Chun began gently. I've noticed it too, of course. I may be old, but I'm not blind. I'm okay, Maya said automatically, the lie she'd been telling everyone for weeks. No, you're not. And that's understandable. Mrs. Chun stopped at a red light and turned to look at Maya directly. I served in the Navy myself, many years ago. I wasn't in special operations, I was a nurse, but I knew people in that community. I've seen what that life demands, what it costs the families. Maya felt tears threatening again. Something about Mrs. Chun's matter-of-fact acknowledgement of the truth was overwhelming after weeks of having it denied. Does your mother know how bad things have gotten at school? Mrs. Chun asked. I can't tell her, Maya said, her voice breaking. She's dealing with so much already. She can't be distracted worrying about me and middle school drama. People's lives depend on her being focused. Mrs. Chun was quiet for a moment, navigating a turn. You're very mature to think of it that way. But you're also carrying a heavy burden alone. That's not sustainable, Maya. Even the strongest people need support. I have Kevin, Maya offered weakly. Kevin is a good boy, and I'm glad you have his friendship. But he's also 12 and dealing with his own challenges. Mrs. Chun pulled up in front of Maya's house, but didn't unlock the doors yet. I want you to know that my library is always open to you. If you need to talk, if you need a quiet place, if you need anything at all, I'm there. And I believe you, Maya. About your mother, about all of it. I believe you. The simple statement broke something open inside Maya. She started crying in earnest, months of pent-up emotion pouring out. Mrs. Chun reached over and held her hand, saying nothing, just providing silent support until Maya had cried herself out. Thank you, Maya finally whispered, wiping her eyes with the sleeve of her jacket. No thanks necessary. Now, there's something I want to tell you about the Veterans Day Assembly. Mrs. Chun's expression shifted to something more strategic. I've been invited to speak, to represent Navy veterans. And I was thinking about what I might say. Maya's eyes widened. The Veterans Day Assembly had been looming in her mind like a storm on the horizon, something she both dreaded and desperately hoped might change things. I can't promise miracles, Mrs. Chun continued. But I can promise to represent the truth about military service, including the incredible achievements of women in combat roles. The rest, whether your classmates choose to connect the dots, that's up to them. As Maya walked into her house, she felt lighter than she had in weeks. Someone believed her. Someone in a position of respect and authority acknowledged the truth. It was a small thing, perhaps, but it felt monumental. That evening, Maya's father noticed the change in her mood over dinner. Michael Rodriguez had been walking a tightrope for months, trying to support his daughter while respecting her wishes not to make things worse by intervening too directly. He knew more than Maya realized about what was happening at school. Teachers had reached out, and he'd seen the social media posts even though Maya didn't know he monitored them. Good day, he asked, keeping his tone casual. Better than usual, Maya admitted. Mrs. Chun gave me a ride home. She's really nice. Michael nodded, recognizing the name. The librarian? Kevin's grandmother. Yeah, she was in the Navy. She gets it. Father and daughter shared a look of understanding. They both missed Sarah terribly, felt the weight of her absence in different ways. For Michael, it was the loss of his partner, his best friend, the person with whom he'd built a life. For Maya, it was the loss of the one person who could truly validate her experience, who could walk into that school and prove with her mere presence that the truth was real. Your mom called yesterday while you were at school, Michael said carefully. Brief call, just to check in. She asked about you. What did you tell her? Maya's voice was sharp with anxiety. I told her you were doing well, staying strong. She was proud of you. Michael paused, choosing his next words carefully. But, Maya, if things are really bad at school, she would want to know. She would want to help if she could. She can't help, Maya said flatly. She's halfway around the world doing important work. What's she supposed to do? Abandon her team to come deal with middle school bullies. That would just prove them right, that I'm making a big deal out of nothing, that I need my mommy to fight my battles. Michael wanted to argue, to point out that what Maya was enduring wasn't nothing, that no child should have to face that level of isolation and mockery. But he also understood his daughter's fierce independence, inherited directly from Sarah. Pushing too hard would only make Maya retreat further. Okay, he said finally. But promise me you'll tell me if it becomes too much. Promise me you won't suffer in silence because you think you have to be as tough as your mom. I promise, Maya said, though they both knew it was a promise that might not be kept. November marched forward, and the Veterans Day assembly grew closer. The school's bulletin boards filled with patriotic decorations and student essays about military service. Maya saw Brittany and her mother in the hallway one afternoon, clearly meeting with the principal about the assembly arrangements. Brittany caught Maya's eye and smirked, a look that promised the event would be used to further humiliate her. In history class, Mr. Thompson assigned a project related to Veterans Day. Students were to research a military veteran and present their findings to the class. The assignment sent a jolt of anxiety through Maya. She wanted desperately to do her project on her mother, to finally share the truth about Sarah's career with evidence and documentation. But she also knew that any such attempt would be met with skepticism and mockery. Kevin, who happened to be at school that day, noticed her distress during lunch. They sat together in the library, picking at their sandwiches while discussing the assignment. Do your project on your mom, Kevin urged. This is your chance to show them the truth. How? Maya asked helplessly. I can't show pictures of her on missions because they don't exist. I can't share details about her operations because they're classified. All I have are vague certificates and my word, which they've already decided is worthless. What about your dad? Could he help you put something together? Maya shook her head. He'd want to, but then it becomes about him defending me instead of me standing on my own. It would just confirm what everyone thinks, that I need my parents to back up my lies. Kevin frowned, clearly frustrated on her behalf. This is so messed up. You're being punished for telling the truth about something amazing, and the people lying to themselves face no consequences. That afternoon, Maya approached Mr. Thompson after class. The history teacher looked up from his desk, his expression welcoming but curious. Mr. Thompson, can I do my Veterans Day project on someone other than a family member? Maya asked, her voice small. The teacher studied her for a moment, understanding flickering in his eyes. You can do it on anyone you choose, Maya. But can I ask why you want to avoid your mother as a subject? Her service is something to be proud of. I know, Maya said, fighting back tears. But I'm tired of defending it. I'm tired of trying to prove the truth to people who've decided not to believe me. I just want to do the assignment and not have it become another thing they can use against me. Mr. Thompson leaned back in his chair, his expression troubled. Maya, I want you to know that I believe you. I've seen enough in my time to recognize the real thing, and nothing about what you've said has ever seemed false to me. But I understand your position, and if you choose to research a different veteran, I'll support that decision. The validation from Mr. Thompson, combined with Mrs. Chin's earlier support, gave Maya strength she hadn't known she needed. These adults, with their own military experience and understanding, believed her when her peers did not. It wasn't enough to erase the daily humiliation, but it was something to hold on to. Maya decided to do her project on the Navajo Code Talkers, fascinated by their story and grateful for a topic that had nothing to do with her own life. She threw herself into the research, spending hours in the library with Mrs. Chin's quiet assistants, learning about these brave men who had used their language to create an unbreakable code during World War II. Kevin, meanwhile, decided to do his project on women in combat roles throughout history. When Maya questioned whether this was too obvious a show of support, Kevin shrugged. It's interesting to me, and it's factual. If people want to read into it, that's their problem. His loyalty was touching, even as Maya worried about the social costs he might pay for it. The day before the Veterans Day assembly, something unexpected happened. Maya was walking past the main office when she heard Principal Donovan speaking with someone on the phone. The door was slightly ajar, and, while Maya didn't mean to eavesdrop, the words caught her attention. Yes, Commander Rodriguez, we're honored that you'll be able to attend. Your daughter Maya is a student here, and I know she'll be thrilled to see you. Maya's heart stopped. Her mother was coming. Sarah was going to be at the assembly. The revelation sent Maya's mind spinning. Joy, terror, and anxiety collided in equal measure. On one hand, having her mother present would prove everything she'd been saying for months. On the other hand, the prospect of her two worlds colliding, school life and home life, mockery and truth, felt overwhelming. She hurried away from the office before the principal could spot her, her mind racing. Should she tell her classmates? Should she warn the Richardson twins that they were about to be proven wrong? Or should she say nothing and let the truth reveal itself? That evening, Maya's father confirmed what she'd overheard. Sarah's deployment had ended early due to operational changes, and she would be stateside for several weeks of debriefing and leave. She specifically requested to attend Maya's school assembly, seeing it as an opportunity to finally meet the community her daughter had been living in for the past year. She doesn't know how bad it's been, Michael said gently. I thought about telling her, preparing her, but I wasn't sure if that was the right call. Don't tell her yet, Maya begged. Let her just come to the assembly. If she knows beforehand, she'll worry, and I don't want that hanging over everything. Michael looked uncertain, but agreed. That night, Maya lay awake for hours, alternating between excitement at seeing her mother and terror about what would happen at school. She imagined different scenarios, her mother arriving in uniform, the shocked faces of her classmates, the moment when Brittany Richardson realized the truth. But imagination couldn't capture the complexity of what was really going to happen. The morning of the Veterans Day assembly arrived with unusual weather, a cold snap that had brought the first frost of the season. Maya dressed carefully, choosing her best jeans and a blue sweater her mother had sent her from abroad. She braided her hair the way Sarah had taught her, a small connection to her mother that she could carry with her through the morning. At school, the atmosphere was electric. The assembly was scheduled for second period, and the morning classes buzzed with anticipation. Students had been practicing presentations, and the auditorium had been decorated with flags and patriotic bunting. Maya moved through it all in a daze, Kevin beside her offering silent support. Today's the day, Kevin whispered as they walked to their lockers. Are you ready? I don't know what I am, Maya admitted. I just want it to be over. In the hallway, Maya passed Brittany, who was carrying a clipboard and organizing student volunteers for the assembly. Brittany's mother, Mrs. Richardson, stood beside her, dressed in an expensive suit and radiating the kind of authority that came from wealth and social position. Maya, Mrs. Richardson called out, her voice dripping with false sweetness. I hope you'll pay close attention to today's assembly. It will be very educational about real military service. The implication was clear, and several students within earshot snickered. Maya felt her face flush but forced herself to keep walking. Just a few more hours, she told herself. Just hold on a little longer. The first period crawled by. Maya couldn't focus on anything the teachers said, her mind constantly wandering to her mother. Was Sarah already at the school? Where would she be during the assembly? What would she say if she spoke? When the bell finally rang for second period, students flooded into the hallways, all moving toward the auditorium. Maya let herself be carried along by the crowd, Kevin at her side. As they entered the large space, Maya scanned the area, looking for her mother. The stage was set with chairs for the speakers, but they were still empty. Students filed into their designated sections by grade level. Maya and Kevin found seats toward the back of the 8th grade section, which suited Maya perfectly. She wanted to be able to see everything without being too visible herself. Across the auditorium, she could see Brittany and Brandon in the front row, their mother seated with other parent volunteers along the side. Principal Donovan took the stage as the last students settled into their seats. The chatter died down to whispers, then silence as he began to speak. Good morning, Lincoln Middle School. Today we gather to honor all those who have served our country in uniform. Veterans Day is a time to reflect on sacrifice, duty, and the incredible men and women who defend our freedom. As Principal Donovan continued his opening remarks, the side door to the auditorium opened, and the speakers for the assembly began filing in. Maya sat forward, her heart pounding, searching for her mother among them. There was a man in an army uniform, an older woman in navy dress blues, several people in civilian clothes with pins indicating their veteran status, and Mrs. Chun, looking dignified in a navy blue dress with her service ribbons pinned to her collar. But no Sarah. Maya's mother wasn't among them. Confusion and disappointment warred in Maya's chest. Had her father been wrong? Had the plans changed at the last minute? The speakers took their seats on stage. I want to talk about something that many people don't realize, Mrs. Chun continued, her voice carrying across the hushed auditorium. The evolution of military service and who is allowed to serve in combat roles. When I joined the Navy decades ago, there were many positions closed to women. We couldn't serve on combat ships, couldn't fly combat aircraft, and certainly couldn't join Special Operations Forces. Maya's attention snapped back to the stage, her disappointment momentarily forgotten. Mrs. Chun was looking directly at her, a small, encouraging smile on her face. Today, that has changed dramatically. Women serve in every capacity throughout our military, including in the most elite units. Navy SEALs, Army Rangers, Marine Raiders. These positions are now open to any qualified candidate, regardless of gender. The standards haven't changed, which is as it should be. But the opportunity has expanded, and that's something we should all recognize and celebrate. A ripple of whispers moved through the 8th grade section. Maya felt eyes turning toward her, though she kept her gaze fixed on Mrs. Chun. Across the auditorium, she could see Brittany leaning over to whisper to her mother, both of them wearing identical expressions of smug satisfaction. The first woman graduated from SEAL training in 2021, Mrs. Chun continued. Since then, others have followed. These are real people, real warriors, serving alongside their brothers in arms. Their accomplishments aren't theoretical or hypothetical. They're documented fact, and they represent the best of what our military can be. A meritocracy where ability, not gender, determines who serves and how. Principal Donovan stood to thank Mrs. Chun, but before he could speak, Mrs. Richardson stood up from her seat along the side. Her voice rang out across the auditorium, stopping the principal mid-sentence. Mrs. Chun, that's very inspiring, but I think we should be careful about presenting unverified information to students. I've done quite a bit of research on this topic recently, and while women technically can attempt SEAL training, the actual number who've succeeded is extremely small. We wouldn't want students getting the impression that this is common or that their classmates might personally know someone in such a position. The odds of that would be astronomically small. The auditorium erupted in noise. Students began talking excitedly. Teachers tried to restore order, and Maya felt the world tilting around her. This was it, the moment she'd been dreading. Mrs. Richardson had just indirectly called her a liar in front of the entire school, wrapped in reasonable-sounding concern about facts and statistics. Mrs. Chun remained calm at the podium, her expression unchanging. You're right that the numbers are small, Mrs. Richardson. Excellence always is. But statistical rarity doesn't equal impossibility. The fact that something is uncommon doesn't mean it doesn't exist or that we shouldn't acknowledge and honor it when it does. Of course, Mrs. Richardson replied, her smile sharp. I just think we should be careful about. The back door of the auditorium opened with a loud click that somehow cut through all the noise. Every head turned as a figure entered, silhouetted against the bright hallway lights. As the person stepped forward into the auditorium proper, Details became clear. A woman in navy dress blues, the uniform perfectly pressed, ribbons, and insignia gleaming in the overhead lights. She moved with a precise, economical grace that commanded attention without demanding it. Commander Sarah Rodriguez walked down the center aisle of the auditorium, and the noise died away to absolute silence. Her dark hair was pulled back in a tight regulation bun, her posture military straight, her face composed and professional. She looked neither left nor right as she walked, focused entirely on the stage ahead, but her presence filled the entire space. Maya's breath caught in her chest. Her mother was here. After months of absence, months of defending her existence to people who refused to believe, Sarah Rodriguez was walking through Lincoln Middle School in full uniform, real and undeniable. Principal Donovan recovered first, hurrying to the microphone. "Commander Rodriguez, thank you for joining us. We're honored to have you here." Sarah reached the stage and turned to face the auditorium for the first time. Her eyes found Maya immediately, and the smallest smile touched her lips before her expression returned to professional neutrality. That brief moment of connection sent warmth flooding through Maya's chest. "Thank you, Principal Donovan," Sarah said, her voice clear and carrying easily through the sound system as a staff member quickly brought her a microphone. "I apologize for my late arrival. My flight was delayed." "No apology necessary. We were just discussing military service and the evolution of opportunities for women in combat roles." The principal glanced at Mrs. Richardson, who had gone very pale, and sat down abruptly. "Would you like to share a few words with our students?" Sarah accepted the microphone and stood at ease at the podium, scanning the sea of young faces before her. When she spoke, her voice was calm, measured, and utterly authoritative. "I'm Commander Sarah Rodriguez, United States Navy. I've been serving for 16 years, the last 8 in naval special warfare. I'm currently assigned to a SEAL team, though I can't discuss specific operations or locations." The auditorium remained silent. Even the usual fidgeters and whisperers sat frozen, transfixed by this woman who radiated competence and strength. Mrs. Chin spoke about the opening of special operations positions to women. "She's correct. I was part of the second class of women to graduate from BUD/S, which is the Basic Underwater Demolition/SEAL Training Program. It took me 3 attempts to complete it. The first 2 times, I was injured, once severely enough that I spent 8 months in rehabilitation before I could try again." Sarah paused, and Maya could see her mother's hand move unconsciously to her left shoulder, where Maya knew a long scar marked where surgeons had repaired a torn rotator cuff. "I tell you this not to boast, but to illustrate a point. Excellence isn't about gender. It's about dedication, resilience, and the willingness to push beyond what you think your limits are. Every person in the military, regardless of their role, has had to overcome challenges. We've all had moments where we wanted to quit, where the mission seemed impossible, where the sacrifice felt too great." Maya watched as her mother's gaze swept across the auditorium, making eye contact with students throughout. When Sarah's eyes reached the 8th grade section, they lingered on Maya for just a moment longer than the others, filled with a pride and love that made Maya's eyes sting with tears. "The reason I wanted to speak today is because my daughter attends this school," Sarah continued, and Maya felt every eye in the auditorium turn to stare at her. "And I understand that some of you have had trouble believing that her mother serves in special operations. That's understandable. It is statistically rare. But rare doesn't mean impossible, and I wanted to stand here before you as proof that the things Maya has been telling you are true." The silence in the auditorium was absolute, so complete that Maya could hear her own heartbeat pounding in her ears. Across the room, Brittany Richardson looked like she wanted to disappear into her seat. Her mother's face had gone from pale to red, mortification written clearly in her expression. "More importantly," Sarah said, her voice softening slightly, "I want to talk about something that matters more than my job or my rank. I want to talk about the kids like my daughter, who live with the reality of military service every day, who say goodbye not knowing when or if you'll come home, who move schools and cities and have to start over again and again, who carry the weight of classified information and long deployments and worry that becomes their constant companion." Maya felt tears streaming down her face now, unable to hold them back any longer. Kevin squeezed her shoulder gently, offering silent support. Being a military child takes its own kind of courage, Sarah continued. It takes strength to defend a truth that other people choose not to believe. It takes resilience to stand firm when you're being mocked for something you can't prove, not because it isn't real, but because the nature of the work requires secrecy. Sarah's eyes found Maya again, and this time she spoke directly to her daughter, though her words were meant for everyone. Maya, I want you to know how proud I am of you. You've handled these past months with more grace and strength than I could have at your age. You didn't lash out, you didn't give up, and you never once made it about you when you could have asked me to intervene. That's the mark of real character. The tears were flowing freely now, and Maya didn't care who saw. Around her, she could hear sniffles from other students, could see some wiping their eyes. Even some of the teachers looked emotional. I also want to address those of you who doubted Maya's story, Sarah said, her tone shifting back to something more stern. There's a lesson here about the difference between healthy skepticism and refusing to believe something simply because it doesn't fit your expectations or worldview. In this age of instant information, you all have the tools to verify facts at your fingertips. The choice to believe or disbelieve should be based on evidence and research, not on assumptions or social dynamics. Mrs. Richardson stood abruptly and hurried out of a side exit, unable to face the situation she had created. Several other parents who had been sitting with her looked uncomfortable, uncertain whether to stay or follow. Brittany remained in her seat, staring at her lap, her face flushed with shame. Sarah let that point hang in the air for a moment before continuing. But more than that, I want to talk about kindness. About the choice we all make every day to either build people up or tear them down. Military training teaches us about unit cohesion, about trusting your teammates, and having their backs no matter what. Those lessons apply far beyond the battlefield. They apply here, in your school, in your daily interactions with your peers. Principal Donovan stood and began to approach the podium, clearly ready to wrap up the assembly and perhaps prevent any further uncomfortable revelations. But Sarah held up a hand, asking for one more moment. I know my time here is limited. I'm due back for debriefing in 3 days. But I wanted to take this opportunity to thank the educators who have supported military families in this school. Mrs. Chun, Mr. Thompson, and others who understand the unique challenges our children face. And to all the students here, I want to leave you with this thought. You don't have to agree with everyone. You don't have to like everyone. But you do have a responsibility to treat each other with basic human dignity and respect. That's not a military value. It's a human one. She handed the microphone back to Principal Donovan, who looked somewhat shell-shocked but managed to thank her for her service and her words. The principal then dismissed the students back to their classes, but the usual rush for the doors didn't happen. Instead, students filed out slowly, quietly, processing what they had just witnessed. Maya remained in her seat, overwhelmed and uncertain what to do next. Kevin stayed beside her, waiting patiently. As the auditorium emptied, Sarah made her way down from the stage and up the aisle toward her daughter. When she reached Maya's row, Sarah paused. For a moment, mother and daughter just looked at each other, months of separation and pain and love passing between them. Then, Maya launched herself at her mother, and Sarah caught her in a fierce hug, one hand cradling the back of Maya's head. I'm sorry I couldn't be here sooner, Sarah whispered into Maya's hair. I'm sorry you had to face all of this alone. You're here now, Maya managed to say through her tears. That's what matters. They held each other for a long moment while Kevin tactfully studied the ceiling. Finally, Sarah pulled back, keeping her hands on Maya's shoulders, and looked her daughter over carefully. You've gotten taller, Sarah observed, a smile tugging at her lips. And older, more grown up than when I left. I had to grow up fast, Maya said, trying to keep her tone light, but unable to hide the weight beneath the words. Sarah's expression grew serious. Your father gave me a more complete picture of what's been happening here. Last night, after I insisted, Maya, why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you reach out? You were on a mission. I couldn't distract you with middle school drama. Middle school drama? Sarah shook her head. Maya, you were being systematically isolated and mocked for months. That's not drama. That's real pain. And you didn't have to face it alone. Yes, I did, Maya said quietly. Because you taught me to be strong. You taught me that sometimes you have to complete the mission even when it's hard. This was my mission, getting through this school year, proving I could handle it. Sarah's eyes glistened with unshed tears, a rare show of emotion from her typically composed mother. I never meant for you to think that strength means suffering in silence. Real strength is knowing when to ask for help. Kevin cleared his throat politely. I'm Kevin, Mrs. Chin's grandson. I just wanted to say that your daughter is pretty awesome, and also that what you said in there was really cool. Sarah smiled at him, releasing Maya to shake Kevin's hand formally. Kevin Chun, Maya has mentioned you in her emails. Thank you for being a good friend to her. Mrs. Chun herself appeared at the end of the row, her expression warm. Commander Rodriguez, it's an honor to finally meet you face to face. The two Navy veterans shared a moment of understanding, years of shared experience communicating in a single look. Mrs. Chun had been right to tell Maya she believed her, and now she had been vindicated in front of the entire school community. The honor is mine, Mrs. Chun. Maya speaks highly of you, and now I understand why. Thank you for supporting her when I couldn't be here. She made it easy, Mrs. Chun said, smiling at Maya. She's remarkably resilient. Students were still filtering past in the aisles, and Maya noticed many of them staring. Some looked curious, some ashamed, some simply awed. A few of the braver ones approached hesitantly. Excuse me, Commander Rodriguez? A boy from Maya's English class stood nervously nearby. I just wanted to say I'm sorry. For not believing Maya. That was really wrong of me. Sarah regarded him seriously for a moment, then nodded. What's your name? Tyler, ma'am. Tyler, the fact that you're apologizing shows character. That takes courage too. Thank you. Tyler nodded and hurried away, clearly relieved. Others followed, a slow trickle of students offering apologies or simply wanting to meet Maya's mother. Sarah handled each interaction with grace, never making them feel worse than they already did, but also not letting them off the hook entirely. It was a masterclass in leadership that Maya filed away for future reference. Principal Donovan approached with Mr. Thompson, both men clearly wanting to speak with Sarah. Commander Rodriguez, I wonder if we could have a word in my office? I'd like to discuss how the school can better support military families going forward. Sarah glanced at Maya, questioning. Go ahead, Maya said. I have class anyway. I'll see you after school. Sarah confirmed. We'll go home together? Yeah. Dad's picking us both up. Sarah kissed the top of Maya's head, a gesture so familiar it made Maya's chest ache with how much she'd missed it. Then, her mother followed the principal and Mr. Thompson out of the auditorium, leaving Maya with Kevin and Mrs. Chun. That was intense, Kevin said, understating dramatically. That's one way to put it, Maya agreed, wiping her eyes one final time. How do you feel? Mrs. Chun asked gently. Maya considered the question. Vindicated, relieved, exhausted, proud, scared about what happens next. What happens next is whatever you make of it, Mrs. Chun said. The truth is out there now. How people respond to it is their choice. But at least you don't have to carry the burden of proof anymore. The rest of the school day passed in a surreal blur. In every class, students who had been ignoring or mocking Maya for months suddenly wanted to talk to her. Some were genuinely apologetic, like Tyler. Others were clearly trying to save face, claiming they had always believed her, but just went along with the crowd. A few, like Brittany Richardson, avoided her entirely, unable to face the embarrassment of being so publicly proven wrong. Brittany's brother Brandon approached Maya in the hallway between classes, looking uncomfortable but determined. Hey Maya, that was pretty crazy today. Yeah, Maya agreed warily, unsure where this was going. Look, I was a jerk. My sister too, but especially me. I should have just looked it up instead of assuming you were lying. Your mom is actually really cool. Thanks, Maya said, accepting the apology even though the months of pain couldn't be erased by a single conversation. Do you think she'd ever come talk to my Boy Scout troop? We're doing a merit badge on military service, and that would be amazing. Maya almost laughed at the audacity, but she recognized the question for what it was, an olive branch, however, self-interested. I can ask her. When the final bell rang, Maya practically ran to the front circle where her father would be picking her up. She spotted their car immediately and Her heart lifted when she saw her mother in the passenger seat. Michael Rodriguez was smiling, the tension that had been etched into his face for months finally easing. The drive home was filled with conversation about everything and nothing. Sarah asked about Maya's classes, her favorite subjects, what she'd been reading. They talked about Kevin and Mrs. Chun, about the projects Maya had been working on. It felt gloriously normal, like slipping into a comfortable routine that Maya hadn't realized she'd been starving for. At home, Sarah changed out of her uniform into civilian clothes, jeans, and a navy sweatshirt that had seen better days. The transformation was subtle but significant. This was Mom, not Commander Rodriguez, the woman who made terrible jokes and always burned the popcorn when they had movie nights. That evening, the three of them cooked dinner together, something they hadn't done as a family in over 4 months. Michael handled the main course while Sarah and Maya worked on a salad, chopping vegetables side by side at the kitchen counter. It was during this quiet moment, with her father singing off-key to the radio in the background, that Sarah brought up the harder conversation. "Tell me everything," Sarah said quietly, her knife moving through a cucumber with practiced precision. "Don't leave anything out because you think it will upset me. I need to know what you went through." Maya hesitated, but then began talking. She told her mother about the first day when Brittany had openly mocked her, about the isolation that had grown day by day, classroom by classroom, about eating alone in the library and the social media posts that turned her life into a joke, about the weight of defending a truth no one wanted to believe. Sarah listened without interrupting, her hands growing still as Maya spoke. When Maya finally finished, her mother set down the knife and pulled her into a tight hug. "I'm so sorry," Sarah whispered fiercely. "I'm sorry I wasn't here. I'm sorry you had to face that alone." "You were saving lives," Maya said, her voice muffled against her mother's shoulder. "You were doing important work." "You're important work too," Sarah said, pulling back to look Maya in the eye. "You're my most important mission, always. I need you to understand that. I chose this career before you were born, and I love what I do, but nothing, absolutely nothing, is more important to me than you and your dad." "I know that," Maya said, and she did. Even through the months of separation, she had never doubted her mother's love. "Do you, though?" Sarah searched her daughter's face. "Because you chose to suffer in silence rather than reach out to me. That tells me you thought my work was more important than your well-being, and that's not acceptable. It's not what I want you to learn from my example." Michael joined them in the kitchen, having overheard the last part of the conversation. "She's right, Maya. We both love you more than anything. Whatever challenges we face them as a family." The three of them stood in the kitchen, arms around each other, and, for the first time in months, Maya felt completely safe. The validation of her truth, the presence of her mother, and the support of her father created a fortress against the world that had been so cruel. Dinner was a celebration of sorts, even though no one called it that explicitly. They ate Sarah's favorite meal, her grandmother's recipe for arroz con pollo that Michael had perfected over the years. They laughed at Maya's stories about Kevin's attempts to beat the high score on an ancient library computer game. Sarah shared carefully edited anecdotes about her recent deployment, the funny moments and small victories that she could discuss without violating security protocols. After dinner, Michael excused himself to grade papers, giving mother and daughter time alone. Maya and Sarah migrated to the living room, settling onto the couch with mugs of hot chocolate, another tradition Maya had missed desperately. "So," Sarah said, tucking her legs under her and turning to face Maya fully. "What happens now?" "What do you mean?" "At school? With your classmates? How do you want to move forward?" Maya considered the question, swirling the marshmallows in her hot chocolate. "I don't know. Part of me wants to make them all suffer, to remind them every day how wrong they were. But mostly I just want things to be normal. I want to have friends and not think about any of this anymore." Sarah nodded thoughtfully. "Both of those feelings are valid. You have every right to be angry about what happened. But you're also wise enough to recognize that holding on to that anger will hurt you more than it hurts them. Did you have to deal with stuff like this when you were going through SEAL training?" "Different situation, but yes, similar dynamics," Sarah said. "There were people who didn't think I belonged, who waited for me to fail, who made every day harder than it needed to be. Some of them never came around." Some of them eventually became my strongest supporters after they saw that I could do the work. How did you handle it? I focused on the mission. I kept my head down, did the work, and let my performance speak for itself. I made friends with the people who treated me fairly and ignored the people who didn't. Sarah paused, taking a sip of her hot chocolate. But I also learned that sometimes you have to educate people. Sometimes their doubts come from ignorance, not malice. Those people are worth the effort to help them understand. Like Brittany and Brandon? Maybe. Time will tell whether their apologies today were genuine or just about avoiding embarrassment. Pay attention to their actions going forward, not just their words. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, the kind that only exists between people who know each other deeply. Outside, the November evening had turned dark and cold, but inside, the house felt warm and safe. "Mom," Maya asked quietly, "do you ever regret it? Choosing this career, knowing how hard it would be on us?" Sarah was quiet for a long moment, considering her answer carefully. "I regret missing moments with you. I regret not being there for your first day at this school, for not seeing you struggle. I regret every birthday and holiday I've missed. But do I regret the career itself? No, because this is who I am, Maya. This work, it matters. And I hope that someday you'll be proud of what I do, even if it's cost us time together." "I'm already proud," Maya said fiercely. "I've always been proud. That's why it hurts so much when they didn't believe me. Because you're incredible, and they were treating your accomplishments like a joke." Sarah's eyes were bright, with unshed tears. "You know what I'm most proud of? The fact that you defended me even when it cost you socially. You could have backed down, could have told them you made it up, could have made your life easier. But you stood by the truth. That takes real courage." The next morning brought another shift in the social dynamics at school. Word had spread overnight through group chats and social media about Commander Rodriguez's appearance at the assembly. By the time Maya arrived at school, she found herself at the center of a different kind of attention, not mockery, but curiosity and genuine interest. Students she'd never spoken to approached her with questions about her mother's career. Some wanted to know about SEAL training, others about deployments, still others about what it was like growing up in a military family. Maya handled each interaction carefully, sharing what she could while respecting the boundaries her mother had set about classified information. Kevin watched this new dynamic with a mixture of amusement and concern. "You've gone from social outcast to celebrity overnight," he observed during their morning library visit. "How does it feel?" "Weird," Maya admitted. "I don't want to be defined by my mom any more than I wanted to be defined by people not believing me about my mom." "So what do you want to be defined by?" It was a good question, one Maya hadn't really considered before. She'd been so focused on defending her truth that she hadn't thought about what came after validation. "I guess I just want to be me. Maya. Not the girl whose mom is a Navy SEAL. Not the girl who was lying. Just me." "That's fair," Kevin said. "Though you should probably figure out who me is first." Mrs. Chun approached their corner with a book cart, smiling at their serious conversation. "Deep thoughts for a Tuesday morning. Kevin's making me have an existential crisis about my identity," Maya joked. "Good. Everyone should have a few of those in middle school. Builds character." Mrs. Chun selected a book from her cart and handed it to Maya. "I thought you might enjoy this. It's about code breaking during World War II. Similar to your Navajo Code Talkers project, but from a different angle." Maya accepted the book gratefully, touched by Mrs. Chin's continued thoughtfulness. The librarian had been a lifeline during the darkest months, and that kindness hadn't been forgotten. In English class, Mrs. Patterson announced that they would be starting presentations for their Veterans Day projects. Maya's stomach tightened with anxiety. She'd worked hard on her Code Talkers project, but presenting in front of the class still felt vulnerable. Brandon Richardson volunteered to go first. He walked to the front of the room with a poster board and a nervous expression. His presentation was about Medal of Honor recipients, and it was surprisingly well-researched. When he finished, Mrs. Patterson asked if anyone had questions. "I have a comment," Brittany said from her seat, and the room tensed. Her relationship with her brother was complicated, competitive, and often antagonistic. But today, her voice was uncharacteristically subdued. "That was really good, Brandon. You obviously put a lot of work into it." The simple compliment broke some of the tension in the room. Other students presented their projects, The class responded with genuine interest and respect. When it was Maya's turn, she walked to the front with her materials, her heart pounding but her head high. She presented on the Navajo Code Talkers with confidence, explaining how their language became an unbreakable code that helped win the Pacific theater of World War II. She talked about the challenges they faced, the prejudice they overcame, and the recognition that came late but was nonetheless meaningful. As she spoke, Maya realized she was also talking about her own experience in a way, about having truth dismissed, about perseverance in the face of doubt, about eventual vindication. When she finished, the class applauded enthusiastically. Several students raised their hands with questions, and Maya fielded them easily. Mrs. Patterson's expression was warm with approval. "Excellent work, Maya. Your research was thorough, and your presentation was clear and engaging. A+." As Maya returned to her seat, she caught Brittany's eye. The other girl looked away quickly, but not before Maya saw something in her expression, not quite an apology, but an acknowledgement. They would never be friends, Maya knew, but perhaps they could coexist without the active hostility that had defined their relationship for months. At lunch, Maya found herself with actual choices about where to sit. The group from yesterday, Jessica and her friends, waved Maya and Kevin over again. But there was also an invitation from some girls in her math class, and even a tentative gesture from students she recognized from art class. Maya chose Jessica's table again, appreciating the group's genuine attempt to make amends. The conversation flowed more easily than the day before, the awkwardness of apologies replaced by discussions of homework and upcoming events. They talked about the winter dance, about favorite movies, about a video game several of them were playing. "Are you going to the dance?" Jessica asked Maya directly. The question caught Maya off guard. She'd barely thought about the winter dance, which was scheduled for mid-December. Such things had seemed irrelevant during her months of isolation. "I don't know. Maybe. You should come. We're planning to go as a group. It'll be fun." The invitation was casual, but Maya recognized it for what it was, a genuine attempt at friendship, not just guilt-driven niceness. She found herself smiling. "Yeah, okay. That sounds good." Kevin, who had been quiet during most of the lunch conversation, spoke up. "I'll be at my other school that week. But you should definitely go." After school, Maya came home to find her mother in workout clothes, clearly having just finished exercising. Sarah maintained a rigorous training schedule even while on leave, a discipline that never wavered. "How was day 2 of the post-revelation era?" Sarah asked, stretching her hamstrings. Maya dropped her backpack and flopped onto the couch. "Weird but good. Everyone's being nice now, which is what I wanted, but it feels strange after so long. Trust takes time to rebuild," Sarah said, moving to her other leg. "The people who are worth your friendship will prove it through consistent actions, not just apologies and temporary niceness. How can you tell the difference? Time and attention. Watch how they treat not just you, but others. Watch what they do when it's not convenient to be kind. Watch how they handle conflicts and disagreements." Sarah finished stretching and sat down next to Maya. "And trust your instincts. You've developed good judgment these past months, even if it came through hard experience." That evening, Maya worked on her homework at the kitchen table while her parents cooked dinner together. The normalcy of the scene was almost overwhelming in its beauty. For months, it had been just her and her father in this house, her mother's absence a constant ache. Now, even knowing this was temporary, having all three of them together felt like a gift. "I have to go back in 10 days, Sarah said during dinner, addressing the reality they'd all been avoiding. "Debriefing is scheduled for a week, and then I'll have a few days before I need to report for my next assignment." Maya felt her appetite vanish, the food on her plate suddenly unappetizing. "How long will the next deployment be?" 4 to 6 months, standard rotation. "But I'll have better communication access this time. We'll be able to do regular video calls." "That's something," Michael said, reaching over to squeeze Sarah's hand. "More than we had this time." "What if it happens again?" Maya asked quietly. "What if I have problems at school, and you're gone, and I can't tell you?" Sarah set down her fork and gave Maya her full attention. "Then you tell your father, and he tells me, and we deal with it together as a family. No more suffering in silence." No more protecting me from drama that isn't drama at all. We're a team, Maya. Act like it. The words were stern but loving, and Maya nodded her understanding. Also, Sarah continued, I had a long conversation with Principal Donovan this afternoon. The school is implementing some new support systems for military families. They're bringing in a counselor who specializes in deployment-related stress, organizing a support group for kids with parents in service, and training teachers to recognize and address the unique challenges military kids face. So something good came out of all of this, Maya said. Several good things, Sarah corrected. You found out who your real friends are. You developed resilience and strength you didn't know you had. You learned important lessons about standing firm in truth, even when it's difficult. And you helped create change that will benefit other students going forward. Maya considered this perspective, trying to see her painful experience as something valuable rather than just something to be endured. It was a difficult mental shift, but her mother's framing helped. The weekend arrived, bringing with it a rare period of unscheduled family time. Saturday morning, Sarah woke Maya early for a hike at their favorite trail, a tradition they'd maintained before the deployments intensified. The November air was crisp and cold, their breath visible as they walked. I've missed this, Maya said as they climbed a particularly steep section. Me too. This trail got me through BUD/S, mentally. Whenever things got hard, I'd picture us hiking here together, and it gave me something to work toward. They reached a scenic overlook and paused to catch their breath. Below them, the valley spread out in shades of brown and gold, the last of autumn clinging to the landscape. Mom, can I ask you something? Maya said hesitantly. Anything. When you were going through training, when people doubted you and made things harder, did you ever want to quit? Not because of the physical stuff, but because of how people treated you. Sarah was quiet for a long moment, looking out over the valley. Yes, multiple times. There were days when the prejudice and extra scrutiny felt heavier than any pack I had to carry. Days when I wondered if it was worth it, if maybe everyone else was right, and I didn't belong. What made you keep going? Stubbornness, mostly, Sarah said with a small smile. I refused to let other people's limited vision determine my capabilities. But, also, I kept going because I had something to prove, not to them, but to myself. I needed to know if I could do it. And once I committed to finding out, I couldn't quit without answering that question. Do you ever still doubt yourself? Every single day, Sarah admitted. Doubt isn't the enemy, Maya. Doubt is what keeps you sharp, what makes you prepare and train and push harder. The enemy is letting doubt become an excuse not to try. They hiked in comfortable silence for a while, the rhythm of their steps matching naturally. As they descended back toward the trailhead, Sarah spoke again. I want you to know that I understand if you're angry with me. For choosing this career, for the deployments, for not being there when you needed me. I'm not angry, Maya said, and realized Sunday afternoon brought an unexpected visitor. Maya answered the door to find Brittany Richardson standing on the porch, looking uncomfortable and uncertain. For a moment, they just stared at each other, months of conflict hanging between them like a tangible thing. Can I talk to you? Brittany asked, her voice small in a way Maya had never heard before. Maya glanced back into the house where her parents were in the kitchen, then stepped outside, closing the door behind her. The November air was cold, and neither of them had jackets on, but Maya wasn't ready to invite Brittany inside. What do you want? I wanted to apologize. Properly, not just a quick sorry in the hallway. Brittany looked at her feet, then forced herself to meet Maya's eyes. What I did to you was awful. What I said, how I treated you, getting other people to join in. It was cruel, and I'm sorry. Maya waited, sensing there was more. My mom has been really upset since the assembly, Brittany continued. She's embarrassed about what happened, about how she acted in front of everyone. She keeps saying she was just trying to be helpful, but I think she knows she was being judgmental. And I realized I was doing the same thing, just in a different way. Why? Maya asked. Why did you decide I was lying before you even tried to find out the truth? Brittany was silent for a long moment, struggling with the answer. Because it made me feel important, I guess. Like I knew something everyone else didn't. And because if you were telling the truth, that made you interesting and special in a way I'm not. It was easier to make you the liar than to deal with feeling ordinary. The honesty of the answer surprised Maya. She had expected excuses or deflection, not this raw admission of insecurity. I'm not asking us to be friends, Brittany said quickly. I know I don't deserve that. But I wanted you to know that I see what I did wrong. And I'm going to do better. I'm going to treat you with respect from now on. Okay, Maya said carefully. I appreciate you coming here and saying this. Brittany nodded, clearly relieved to have the conversation over with. She turned to leave, then paused. Your mom is really cool, by the way. What she said in the assembly about kindness and human dignity. I've been thinking about that a lot. After Brittany left, Maya went back inside to find both her parents pretending they hadn't been eavesdropping from the kitchen window. Sarah raised an eyebrow questioningly, and Maya shrugged. She apologized. For real this time, I think. How did that feel? Michael asked. Strange. Good, but strange. Like closing a chapter in a book I didn't really enjoy reading. Sarah smiled. That's actually a perfect way to put it. Some experiences are valuable not because they're pleasant, but because they end and you get to move on. Monday at school brought another shift. The novelty of Commander Rodriguez's appearance had worn off slightly, and the social dynamics were settling into a new normal. Maya wasn't isolated anymore, but she also wasn't the center of attention. She had a regular lunch table now, friends who texted her about homework and made plans for the weekend. It wasn't perfect, but it was infinitely better than what she'd endured for months. In English class, Mrs. Patterson announced a new assignment, a personal essay about overcoming challenges. Maya knew immediately what she would write about, but this time without the fear of mockery. She spent several days crafting her essay, choosing her words carefully to convey not just the pain of the experience, but the growth that came from it. When she finally submitted it, Mrs. Patterson pulled her aside after class. Maya, I want you to know that I'm sorry. I saw what was happening in this classroom, and I should have done more to stop it earlier. I told myself I was letting you develop resilience, but really I was taking the easier path of not confronting the popular students. It's okay, Maya started to say, but Mrs. Patterson shook her head. No, it's not okay, but I'm going to learn from it. I've already talked to the other teachers about how we can better support students who are being isolated or mocked. Your experience is going to help make this school better for other kids. The conversation left Maya feeling validated in a way she hadn't expected. It wasn't just about her mother's vindication anymore. It was about acknowledgement that what happened to her mattered and deserved a response. Kevin's next day at school coincided with the return of the graded Veterans Day projects. He had gotten an excellent grade on his presentation about women in combat roles, and Mr. Thompson had added a note thanking him for his well-researched and timely topic. Timely, Kevin read aloud, grinning. I think that's teacher code for good timing with the Commander Rodriguez drama. It wasn't drama, Maya protested, but she was smiling. It was a significant social and educational event. Right? Very significant. So significant that I heard they're making you the poster child for the new military family support program. They're not making me anything. Principal Donovan just asked if I'd be willing to talk to other military kids sometimes, if they need someone who understands what it's like. And you said yes? I said maybe. I need to think about it. Maya closed her locker, and they started walking to class. Part of me wants to help, but another part of me just wants to move on and not have my entire identity be about being a military kid. That's fair. You could always do both, help sometimes, but also have your own separate life. When did you get so wise? I've always been wise. You're just now noticing. They laughed together, and Maya felt a warmth in her chest that had been absent for so long. This was friendship, real, easy, comfortable friendship, not based on social status or image, but on genuine connection and mutual respect. That afternoon, Sarah picked Maya up from school for the first time, driving the family car and waiting in the pickup line like any other parent. But Maya noticed the reactions from other students as they passed. Some pointed, others stared, a few waved enthusiastically. Her mother had become something of a local celebrity, at least in the middle school world. How was your day? Sarah asked as Maya buckled her seatbelt. Good. Normal, mostly. Kevin made me laugh in math class and got us both in trouble. Sounds about right for middle school. Sarah pulled out of the parking lot, navigating the traffic with practiced ease. I talked to your father today about next year. We're considering a transfer to a different command, one that would keep me stateside with minimal deployments. Maya looked at her mother in surprise. Really? Would you do that? I'm thinking about it. I've given a lot of years to this career, accomplished most of what I set out to do. Maybe it's time to prioritize being home more consistently. Sarah glanced at Maya, her expression serious. But I need you to understand that if I make that choice, it's not because you're not strong enough to handle the deployments. It's because I want to be here more. There's a difference. I understand, Maya said, and she did. Her mother wasn't giving up her career because Maya had struggled. She was making a choice about priorities and life stages. Nothing's decided yet. But I wanted you to know we're considering options. The thought of having her mother home more regularly was almost overwhelming in its appeal. But Maya also understood that Sarah's work mattered, that her skills and experience saved lives. Whatever decision her parents made, Maya would support it. The following days brought a steady rhythm of normalcy that Maya had been craving. She studied for tests, complained about homework, gossiped with Jessica about who was dating whom. She went to Kevin's house for dinner when he was at their school, meeting his parents and his collection of rescue cats. She started staying after school for art club, discovering a talent for watercolor painting she hadn't known she had. Brittany kept her word about being respectful. They weren't friends, would probably never be friends, but they coexisted peacefully. Sometimes Maya caught Brittany watching her in class with an expression that might have been regret or might have been simple curiosity. Either way, the active hostility was gone. Brandon was more openly friendly, though Maya suspected this had as much to do with wanting to seem connected to someone with a cool parent as it did with genuine remorse. She accepted his friendliness at face value, not investing too deeply, but not rejecting it either. The bigger surprise came from other students Maya barely knew. Kids who approached her to share their own stories of not being believed or being mocked for their family situations. A boy whose father was in prison. A girl whose mother had struggled with addiction. A kid whose family was in witness protection. They found in Maya someone who understood what it meant to defend a truth that others didn't want to accept. These conversations, quiet and often emotional, showed Maya that her experience hadn't been unique. The specifics differed, but the core struggle, being isolated for circumstances beyond your control, resonated with more students than she'd realized. It gave her experience a broader context and, strangely, made it feel more meaningful. On the Wednesday before Thanksgiving, the school held a half-day. Sarah, Michael, and Maya spent the afternoon preparing for the holiday, cooking and cleaning and decorating. It was the first Thanksgiving they'd all be together in 3 years, and the anticipation was palpable. Maya was setting the table when her phone rang. She didn't recognize the number, but answered anyway. "Is this Maya Rodriguez?" a woman's voice asked. "Yes. My name is Captain Jennifer Walsh. I'm a Navy recruiter, but I'm calling for personal reasons. Your mother and I went through BUD/S together. I'm currently stationed nearby and wondered if I could take you and your mom out for coffee sometime. I'd like to meet the young woman Sarah talks about so often." Maya was surprised but pleased. "Sure, that sounds great. Let me get my mom." She handed the phone to Sarah, who lit up when she heard who was calling. The two women talked for several minutes, catching up and making plans. When Sarah hung up, she was smiling. "That was Jen. We went through hell together at BUD/S. She heard about the situation at your school and wanted to reach out, offer support." Sarah's expression turned thoughtful. She's also thinking about having kids soon and wanted advice about balancing career and family. "What will you tell her?" "That it's hard, that there are sacrifices and challenges, but also that it's worth it, that the people you love make all the difficulties worthwhile." Sarah pulled Maya into a side hug. "I'll tell her that she'll mess up sometimes, miss important moments, make her kids carry burdens they shouldn't have to carry, but that loving them completely and being there whenever possible can get you through the hard parts." Thanksgiving Day was exactly what Maya needed, warm and full and uncomplicated. They ate too much food, watched football even though none of them really cared about sports, and played board games that got increasingly competitive as the evening wore on. Sarah told stories about her time in training that had Michael and Maya and Stitches, carefully edited versions that shared the humor without the classified details. Late that night, after Michael had gone to bed, Maya and Sarah sat on the back porch wrapped in blankets, looking at the stars. It was cold enough to see their breath, but neither wanted to go inside yet. "Mom," Maya asked into the comfortable silence, "do you have any regrets about how you handled my situation at school?" Sarah was quiet for a long moment. "I regret not being there when it started. But I don't regret letting you handle it on your own for a while. You discovered strength you didn't know you had. You learned lessons about perseverance and integrity that will serve you for life. If I had intervened immediately, you would have missed that growth. But I was miserable. I know, and that breaks my heart. Growth often comes through difficult experiences, though. The question isn't whether to shield you from all challenges, but how to support you through them." Sarah adjusted her blanket, pulling it tighter. "I think we found a balance eventually. You developed resilience on your own, and then we stepped in with support when you needed it most. I guess that makes sense. Maya, you're going to face challenges throughout your life. Some of them will be because of my career, some will be completely unrelated. What matters is that you know you don't have to face them alone. You have people who love you and believe in you. That's true whether I'm deployed overseas or right here in this house." They sat in silence for a while longer, mother and daughter, watching the stars will overhead. Maya thought about the past months, about pain and growth and vindication. She thought about the friends she'd made and lost and made again. She thought about the lessons she'd learned about truth and belief and standing firm. The week after Thanksgiving brought the winter dance. Maya had almost forgotten about it until Jessica texted to confirm their plans. The thought of going to a school dance, of participating in normal middle school social events, felt surreal after months of isolation. Sarah took Maya shopping for a dress, an experience that was both fun and slightly awkward as they navigated Maya's changing tastes and growing independence. They finally settled on a simple blue dress that Maya felt comfortable in, not too fancy but nice enough for the occasion. The night of the dance, Sarah helped Maya with her hair and makeup, sharing memories of her own middle school dances while carefully applying mascara to Maya's lashes. "You look beautiful," Sarah said, stepping back to admire her work. "I look like me, but fancier," Maya replied, examining her reflection critically. "That's the best kind of beautiful." At the dance, Maya met up with Jessica and her group of friends. Kevin was at his other school, but he'd sent her an encouraging text telling her to have fun and not do anything too embarrassing that might end up on social media. The dance itself was exactly what Maya expected. Too loud music, awkward dancing, and cliques sticking together while pretending to mingle. But something shifted when Maya walked in. Students who had ignored her for months now smiled and said hello. Some even asked her to dance, though Maya suspected this had more to do with her newfound social rehabilitation than with actual romantic interest. She danced with Jessica and her friends, laughing at their terrible moves and feeling lighter than she had in months. At one point, Maya found herself near the refreshment table getting punch when Brittany appeared beside her. For a moment, they stood in awkward silence. "Having fun?" Brittany finally asked. "Yeah, actually. You. It's okay. Dances are kind of overrated, but everyone expects you to be here." They fell silent again, and Maya was about to excuse herself when Brittany spoke again. "I know I already apologized, but I want you to know I meant it. I've been thinking a lot about what your mom said at the assembly, about kindness and treating people with dignity. I'm trying to be better about that." "That's good," Maya said, genuinely meaning it. "Do you think we could ever be friends?" "Not now, maybe, but eventually." Maya considered the question carefully. "I think we could be friendly. I'm not sure about friends. Trust takes time to rebuild, and what happened was pretty significant." "Fair enough. Friendly is a start." They parted ways, and Maya felt a sense of closure she hadn't known she needed. She didn't have to forgive everything immediately or pretend the past hadn't happened. She could be honest about her boundaries while still being open to people changing and growing. The dance ended around 9, and Michael picked Maya up along with Jessica, whom they were dropping off first. In the back seat, Jessica chattered excitedly about who had danced with whom and which songs were the best. Maya listened and contributed but found her mind wandering to bigger thoughts about change and growth and moving forward. At home, Sarah was still awake, sitting in the living room with a book. She looked up when Maya came in, smiling at her daughter's flushed, happy face. Good time. Really good, actually. It felt normal. I felt normal. You are normal. You always have been. You just went through an abnormal situation for a while. Maya sat down next to her mother, suddenly, exhausted but content. When do you leave? 3 days. Sunday morning. The reminder was a punch to the gut, but Maya had been preparing herself for it. 4 to 6 months this time. That's the plan. And better communication, I promise. Weekly calls at minimum. Okay. Maya leaned against her mother's shoulder, feeling the solid warmth of her presence. I'm going to miss you so much. I'm going to miss you too. But we'll get through it. We always do. The remaining days before Sarah's deployment passed in a blur. They packed in as much family time as possible, movies and meals and long conversations about everything and nothing. Sarah met with Maya's teachers, establishing connections and making it clear that while she couldn't always be physically present, she was very much involved in her daughter's life. She met Kevin and his grandmother officially, thanking Mrs. Chun for her support and promising Kevin that Maya would look out for him when he needed it. On Saturday, Captain Walsh came by for that coffee she'd promised. The three of them, Maya, Sarah, and Jen, sat in a cafe downtown talking about military life, family balance, and the unique challenges of being a woman in special operations. Jen was younger than Sarah, still working toward the kind of career Sarah had already built. Listening to them talk, Maya gained new appreciation for her mother's accomplishments and the path she'd blazed for others to follow. Your mom talks about you constantly, Jen told Maya at one point. Even in the middle of training or deployment planning, she'd find ways to mention her daughter. You're her why, the reason she pushes through the hard stuff. The comment made Maya emotional, but in a good way. She'd known her mother loved her, but hearing it confirmed by someone who'd seen Sarah at her most challenged and determined added weight to that knowledge. Sunday morning arrived too quickly. The family stood in the driveway at dawn, Sarah's bags packed and loaded in the car that would take her to the airport. Maya had promised herself she wouldn't cry, but the promise proved impossible to keep. 4 to 6 months, Sarah reminded her, holding Maya tight. And we'll talk every week, more if possible. You can email me anytime about anything. I know. I love you, Mom. I love you too, sweetheart. So much. And I'm proud of you every single day, whether I'm here or halfway around the world. They held each other for a long moment, Michael standing nearby with his own tears threatening. Finally, Sarah pulled back, wiping Maya's cheeks gently. Remember what we talked about. Don't suffer in silence. Talk to your dad, talk to Mrs. Chun, talk to Kevin. Let people help you when you need it. I will. I promise. One more hug, one more kiss on the top of Maya's head, and then Sarah was getting into the car. Maya and Michael stood together in the driveway, watching until the car disappeared around the corner. The house felt emptier immediately, the absence of Sarah's presence palpable. Pancakes, Michael suggested, his voice rough with emotion. Yeah, pancakes sound good. Monday at school felt different in a subtle way Maya couldn't quite name. She wasn't isolated anymore, wasn't defending an impossible truth against determined skeptics. But she also carried the fresh ache of her mother's departure, a wound that would take time to become merely chronic rather than acute. Kevin was at school that day, which helped. They ate lunch together with Jessica and her friends, and the normalcy of the routine provided comfort. In history class, Mr. Thompson announced a new project. Students would research a current event and present on its implications. Maya found herself interested in military policy changes, specifically regarding family support programs for deployed personnel. It felt meaningful, connected to her own experience, but broader in scope. After school, Maya went to the library where Mrs. Chun was shelving books. The older woman smiled when she saw Maya. How are you holding up? Okay, I think. It's hard, but it's not like it was before. I know the truth now, about what I can handle. That's wisdom hard-earned. Your mother would be proud. She is proud. She told me so. Maya paused, then continued. Mrs. Chun, Principal Donovan, asked if I'd be willing to talk to other military kids sometimes, to be like a peer mentor. What do you think? I think it's a generous offer, and only you can decide if you're ready for it. There's no shame in saying yes or no. Maya thought about it over the next few days, considering what she had to offer and whether she wanted to make her experience into something that could help others. Finally, she told Principal Donovan she'd try it, but on her own terms, not as an official program representative, but as someone available to talk if needed. The first student she met with was a 7th grader named Marcus whose father was deploying to Afghanistan. He was scared and angry and trying to pretend he was fine. Maya recognized all of it immediately. "It's okay to be mad," she told him during their library meeting. "And sad. And worried. You don't have to be brave all the time. But my dad keeps saying I need to be strong for my mom and my little sister. You can be strong and still have feelings. They're not opposites." Maya thought about her own experience, about the months of trying to be tough enough that she wouldn't need support. Being strong doesn't mean suffering alone. It means knowing when to ask for help. Marcus looked skeptical, but thoughtful. They talked for half an hour, and while Maya couldn't fix his situation, she could offer understanding. She could be proof that deployment separations were survivable, that the pain didn't last forever, that life continued even when it felt impossible. Over the following weeks and months, Maya found her rhythm. School became genuinely enjoyable rather than something to endure. Her friendship with Jessica's group deepened into something real and lasting. Kevin remained her best friend, their different school schedules making their time together more precious. Even her relationship with Brittany evolved into something resembling mutual respect, if not quite friendship. Sarah kept her promise about regular communication. Every Sunday evening, they had a video call where Maya shared about school and friends while Sarah offered carefully edited stories about her work. The conversations weren't enough. Maya still missed her mother's physical presence desperately, but they were something to hold on to. Maya's father remained her daily constant, the steady presence that kept her grounded. They developed their own routines in Sarah's absence, finding ways to make their family of two feel complete while acknowledging the missing piece. Michael attended all of Maya's school events, helped with homework, and provided the emotional support she needed to navigate the complexities of middle school social life. In December, Maya gave her presentation on military family support programs. She spoke with authority earned through experience, citing statistics and policies, but also sharing personal insights about what actually helps versus what sounds good on paper. Mr. Thompson gave her an A+ and suggested she submit the project to a national essay contest on military family experiences. "You have an important perspective," he told her after class. "Not just because of your mother's career, but because you've lived this reality and learned from it. Other people could benefit from hearing your story." Maya considered his suggestion carefully. The idea of sharing her experience more broadly was both appealing and terrifying. Eventually, she decided to write the essay, not for recognition or prizes, but because telling her story might help someone else feel less alone. As winter break approached, the school held its final assembly of the semester. Principal Donovan spoke about community and growth, acknowledging that the school had learned important lessons that year about assumptions, prejudice, and the importance of believing students' lived experiences. He didn't name Maya specifically, but everyone knew what he was referencing. After the assembly, several teachers approached Maya privately to thank her for her grace in handling a difficult situation and for her willingness to help other military kids adjust. The recognition felt good, validating in a way that external approval can be even when you don't strictly need it. The night before winter break officially began, Maya sat at her computer writing an email to her mother. She told Sarah about the semester's end, about her improved grades and expanding friend group. She told her about Marcus and 2 other military kids she'd been mentoring. She told her about the essay she was writing and the dance she'd attended and the art project she was particularly proud of. But mostly, Maya told her mother that she was okay, that she missed Sarah desperately but was handling it better this time, that she'd learned the lessons Sarah had tried to teach her about strength and resilience and asking for help, that she was proud of her mother's service and no longer felt the need to prove that pride to anyone else. "I understand now what you meant about the mission," Maya typed. "It's not just about proving you can do something hard. It's about doing something that matters, even when it costs you personally. Your work matters, Mom. And I'm grateful that you chose it, even though it means missing time together." I'm proud to be your daughter." She hit send and closed her laptop, feeling lighter than she had in months. The journey from isolation to vindication to acceptance had been longer and harder than she'd ever imagined. But she'd made it through, changed by the experience, but not broken by it. Looking out her bedroom window at the winter stars, Maya thought about the future. Her mother would come home eventually, then leave again, and return once more. The cycle would continue until Sarah chose to change it or retirement forced the issue. There would be more challenges, more times when Maya had to defend her truth or explain her family situation to people who didn't understand. But now Maya knew she could handle it. She had friends who believed her, adults who supported her, and, most importantly, she believed in herself. The girl who had walked through those school doors in August, isolated and mocked, was gone. In her place was someone stronger, wiser, more compassionate, someone who understood that real strength isn't about never being hurt, but about healing and growing from the wounds. And somewhere across the world, Commander Sarah Rodriguez received her daughter's email, read it with tears streaming down her face, and felt a pride deeper than any military commendation could inspire. Her mission, her real mission, the one that mattered more than any operation or objective, was thriving even in her absence. Maya was going to be okay. More than okay. She was going to be extraordinary. The stars wheeled overhead, constant in their patterns, and Maya Rodriguez fell asleep thinking about the future with hope instead of dread, knowing that whatever challenges lay ahead, she had the strength to face them and the wisdom to know she didn't have to face them alone. It was true. I'm sad sometimes. I miss you. But I'm not angry. You're doing important work, and I understand that. You're 12. You shouldn't have to understand that. You should be allowed to be mad at me for missing your life. Can I be both? Understand and still be sad about it? Sarah stopped walking and pulled Maya into a hug. Yes, you can be both. You can be all of it, proud and sad and understanding and mad and everything in between. Your feelings are allowed to be complicated. Brandon nodded, clearly relieved, and hurried away. Kevin, who had witnessed the exchange, rolled his eyes. Unbelievable. Now everyone wants to be your friend because your mom is basically a superhero. It's better than them thinking I'm a liar, Maya pointed out, though she understood Kevin's frustration on her behalf. Lunch was the strangest experience yet. Maya walked into the cafeteria, not the library, the actual cafeteria, for the first time in months. Kevin was beside her, and, to her surprise, several other students waved them over to their table. These weren't the popular kids, but they weren't the outcast either. They were the middle ground, the students who had watched the social drama unfold but hadn't actively participated. "Is it okay if we sit with you?" a girl named Jessica asked. She had been one of the people who questioned Maya in the courtyard weeks ago, but her tone now was genuinely friendly. "We wanted to apologize properly. What happened to you wasn't right." Maya and Kevin exchanged glances, then sat down. The conversation was awkward at first, everyone uncertain how to proceed past the apologies and explanations. But slowly, carefully, they found common ground. They talked about classes and homework, about the upcoming winter break, about anything except Navy SEALs and military service. As Principal Donovan introduced each of them, the Army veteran was Colonel James Peterson, retired after 30 years of service. The older Navy woman was Captain Dorothy Wu, who had served during the Gulf War. There were 3 others, each representing different branches and eras of military service. Mrs. Chun was introduced last, representing Navy veterans and active school community members. Maya barely heard the words. Her eyes kept darting to the doors, expecting her mother to appear. But as the first speaker took the podium and began sharing his story, Sarah still hadn't arrived. Maya felt Kevin's hand reach over and squeeze hers briefly, offering comfort. The assembly proceeded with speeches from each veteran. They shared stories of service and sacrifice, of the bonds formed in uniform, and the challenges of transitioning back to civilian life. Some students listened attentively, others fidgeted or whispered. Maya heard nothing, her disappointment a crushing weight on her chest. When it was Mrs. Chin's turn to speak, the librarian stood and approached the microphone with a quiet dignity. She spoke about her time as a Navy nurse, about treating wounded sailors, and the realities of military medicine. Then, she shifted topics, her voice growing stronger. Maya closed the app, her hands shaking. She wanted to throw the phone across the room, to scream, to do something to release the frustration building inside her. But, instead, she sat in her mother's chair and cried, quiet tears that ran down her cheeks and dripped onto her shirt. She cried for the loneliness, for the daily humiliation, for missing her mother so desperately it felt like a physical ache. She cried because she was 12 years old and carrying a burden that felt impossibly heavy, defending a truth that no one wanted to believe. When her father came home an hour later, Maya had composed herself. She helped him make dinner, answered his questions about school with carefully neutral responses, and pretended that everything was fine. Michael Rodriguez knew his daughter was struggling. He'd had meetings with teachers and counselors, had tried to intervene in ways that only seemed to make things worse. But Maya had begged him not to make a big deal of it, convinced that parental involvement would only increase the mockery. That night, lying in bed, Maya stared at the ceiling and thought about the Veterans Day assembly Brittany had mentioned. Part of her dreaded it, knowing it would be another opportunity for her classmates to analyze and dissect her claims. But another part of her felt a small spark of hope. Maybe, somehow, someone would say something that would make them believe her. Maybe she could find a way to prove what she'd been saying all along. The thought carried her into an uneasy sleep, filled with dreams of her mother coming home, of vindication and relief, of finally being believed.